Hey guys, tonight we're stretching out in a vineyard soaked with twilight and myth. The sky above is a bruised lavender, still clinging to the last stars, while the earth beneath you is sponge soft from a night of rain and revelry. You feel it first, a breath warm and steady ghosting against your arm. You turn your head slowly, and there it is, curled up like a purring furnace with fangs. A leopard the size of a small boat yawns wide enough to show the night sky inside its mouth. Its fur is damp, its eyes half-lidded with the smug contentment of a creature that knows it's in charge. You freeze. You do not make eye contact, and yet somehow you know. You've been claimed. You are not in your bed. You're in ancient Thrace just before dawn, and Dionysus, god of wine, frenzy, illusion, and the beautifully unhinged, is somewhere nearby, probably barefoot, definitely smiling. The vines around you drip with overripe grapes. The tambourines are still rattling in the grass. And the air tastes like fig smoke and last night's laughter. Welcome to the kind of morning that doesn't begin. It resumes. And oh yes, the cats are real, and they don't do boundaries. Somewhere behind you, laughter echoes high, musical, slightly unhinged. Dionysus is awake. He's brushing dust off his ivy crown, handing out figs like it's brunch, and humming some tune no mortal ear should recognize. You sit up slowly, realizing your legs are sticky with grape juice. That's probably fine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love seeing how far this sleepy little caravan travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a Dionysian morning now. That means you didn't wake up. You were reborn. And this rebirth smells like fermented fruit, sweat, sandalwood, and just a little bit of fur. Around you are traces of a party that no one remembers starting. A smashed kylix underfoot, a half-eaten pomegranate on a tambourine, a goat wearing jewelry. You think you see a satyr passed out in a bush, but honestly you've learned not to investigate things that bleat, and lounging just beyond the flickering campfire coals. A trio of spotted leopards, twitching in dreams. The largest one is draped in purple silk, clearly spoiled. The smallest one licks wine from an overturned chalice. There's something weirdly peaceful about it. Dangerous, yes, but peaceful. Like watching a thunderstorm from a safe distance. If that thunderstorm had fangs and a tail. You wonder why big cats? Why not stags or wolves, or maybe something less prone to mauling its owner? But that's just it. Dionysus is not about safety, he's about surrender. He's about walking barefoot into the woods and letting whatever happens, happen. You start to remember bits and pieces, stories whispered over amphorae, temple friezes of wild-eyed dancers, cracked coins showing the god in his feline chariot. The ancient Greeks weren't sure if Dionysus came from Thrace, from Thebes, or from some wilder, even more unnameable place beyond the Aegean. But they agreed on this. He didn't arrive quietly. He arrived to the sound of cymbals and screams, escorted not by priests, but by maenads and panthers. His was a cult of ecstasy, of beautiful danger, and leopards fit the part like a velvet glove with claws inside. Some say his leopards were symbolic, wild urges tamed by the divine. Others insist the big cats were literal, imported from Asia Minor during his travels, then immortalized in ritual and image. Historians still argue whether his feline companions were metaphorical or zoological. You suspect the answer, like all things Dionysian, is yes. The air thickens with memory. You remember the night before, the dancing, the shouting, the moment someone put a laurel wreath on your head and called you beautiful disaster. The moment a panther let you scratch behind its ears, then immediately bit your sandal in half. You remember Dionysus looking at you, laughing as if to say you thought this was going to be a normal night. In his world, transformation isn't optional, it's expected. You don't get to observe, you participate. You don't sip wine, you drink it until you speak languages you never learned. And maybe that's why the big cats are here. Because they're not tamed, they're involved, just like you. The vineyard starts to stir. A Maenad yawns, stretching her arms in a tangle of beads and bruises. A satyr plays a few lazy notes on a flute. The sun rises higher, glinting off leopard eyes and shattered glass. Dionysus, somewhere nearby, raises a cup and toasts the morning like it's a returning lover. And you realize something. This story isn't going to be tidy. It's going to be wild, looped in ivy and claw marks. It's going to follow a god who turns logic to vapor and walks barefoot through chaos with a smile. So hold on, lightly, because we've only just begun to unravel why Dionysus really had a thing for big cats. You blink as your mind tries to process the image. There's something both absurd and deeply poignant about a god stitching his half-human child into his own body. Some say it was out of love. Others say it was panic. Historians still argue whether this was an inherited myth from older fertility cults, or just a narrative attempt to explain why Dionysus was so odd, twice born, half divine, half feral. When Dionysus was finally born again from Zeus's thigh, he came into the world not with a cry but with a laugh, wild, echoing, and possibly accompanied by thunder. You imagine a newborn wrapped not in swaddling cloth, but in ivy and purring fur. There's something primal about this second birth. It's a do-over, but not a clean one. He carries scars from both lives. That's what gives him his strange in-betweenness. Neither here nor there, neither Olympus nor earth, neither holy god nor quite mortal. Just like the leopards that follow him, sleek, silent, belonging to no one. The torchlight flickers. You glance down a nearby corridor where a statue of baby Dionysus stands surrounded by panther cubs. They're carved in marble but somehow still look like they're about to pounce. A detail you notice. One cub is biting the heel of Dionysus's foot. It's playful or threatening, possibly both. And that's the core of this god's vibe, isn't it? Love that might devour you, joy with teeth. He's born from tragedy, saved through absurdity, and raised in the arms of wild nature. Of course he rides with predators. Of course he trusts them more than kings or priests. You sit on a nearby stone bench, taking it all in. The room smells faintly of myrrh and wet fur, either very expensive incense or someone forgot to clean up after the cats again. Somewhere in the distance, the beat of drums begins to pulse through the ground like a heartbeat. You're not sure whether it's a celebration or a warning. A priestess walks by, brushing your shoulder with her sleeve. She carries a small carved leopard figure in her hand. It's worn smooth, clearly handled often. You ask quietly what it means. She smiles distantly and says only, "Because he came from fire but walks with shadow." You don't know what that means. You suspect you're not supposed to. As you rise to follow the drums, you step around a painting half faded on the wall. It shows Dionysus again, this time leading a procession through a field of reeds. The animals behind him aren't trotting, they're dancing, their paws lifted mid-step, tails curled in rhythm. The panthers don't stalk. They sway, and just like that, you realize these weren't pets. They were partners. He didn't dominate them, he matched them. They didn't serve him, they traveled with him. Even as a child fresh from Zeus's thigh, he wasn't alone. The wild always answered his call. So maybe he didn't have a thing for big cats. Maybe they had a thing for him. By now, you're starting to realize that having Zeus as a father comes with baggage, but having Hera as a stepmother, that's like inheriting a haunted temple and pretending it's a cozy little shrine. You're barely out of the thigh-born nursery before Hera catches wind that the little half-god survived. And she is not thrilled. You might expect divine forgiveness, a gentle boys will be boys shrug from Olympus. But Hera doesn't shrug. Hera remembers. She doesn't forget birthdays or betrayals, and she certainly doesn't let unauthorized demigods prance around unchecked. So begins what scholars affectionately refer to as the Hera ruins everything chapter of Dionysus's young life. She sends madness, not in the "oh no, I lost my keys" kind of way, but the "you wander the earth weeping at shadows, naming rivers after your regrets" variety. And just to be sure it sticks, she sprinkles in a little divine confusion, so Dionysus forgets who he is. Classic identity crisis, but with more vine growth and hallucinations. You watch him stumble across the regions of Phrygia and Lydia, muttering to trees, having philosophical arguments with frogs, and occasionally trying to wrestle his own reflection. And all the while his entourage grows. Not followers, fellow outcasts. Nymphs who never fit into riverbanks, satyrs who got kicked out of temple orchestras, mortals who said yes to adventure before checking the fine print, and of course the cats. At first it's one, an ocelot maybe, or some ancient feline no longer with us. It curls up near the fire, blinking slowly like it knows this isn't your average camping trip. Then a second shows up, sleeker, leaner. Then a third. Pretty soon the party isn't complete without a few pairs of luminous eyes watching from the shadows. Some say Hera sent them, intending to threaten the boy. Others claim the wild recognized itself in Dionysus and simply joined him. Historians still argue whether these early feline companions were part of older animal worship rites in Thrace and Phrygia, or invented later by artists eager for drama and fur texture. You settle onto a hillside one evening, watching Dionysus in the firelight. He's drinking from a curved horn, telling a story about stars being born from laughter. The leopards, yes, actual leopards now surround him, not in menace, but in orbit. Like he's a moon they can't help but circle. And here's the twist. Even in his madness, he's magnetic. You've met gods of war, wisdom, and weather. They command, punish, decree. But Dionysus, he seduces, he invites. His madness doesn't isolate, it attracts. Like a fevered Pied Piper with a vineyard instead of a flute. The leopards lie down beside dancers. The nymphs braid ivy into their whiskers. One cat purrs so loudly you feel it in your ribs. Somewhere in the din you hear someone shout, "He rides with the beasts because he is one." You almost nod, but it's not quite right. He doesn't ride them like a conqueror, he becomes them. His wrath is feline, sudden, precise, terrifying. His love is feline too, intense, aloof, always ready to bolt or bite. The leopards aren't just mascots, they're mirrors. One night, Dionysus stands up mid-song and declares he remembers who he is. His voice slices the air like thunder through silk. The cats lift their heads at once as if something ancient has clicked back into place. From that moment forward, he's no longer just wandering. He's building something. A cult, a family, a revolution made of rhythm and risk. And Hera? Well, she notices. She always notices. But this time, something's different. The god she tried to erase has come back stronger, wilder, with a leopard on each side and a crown made of madness. You can almost hear her grinding her divine teeth. But for now, the fires burn bright. The drums get louder. And you? You find yourself swaying, unsure if it's the wine or the wind or something deeper. Something purring in your chest. You're lying on your back in a cave, staring up at a ceiling that glitters not with stars but with damp minerals and the occasional bat. The air is thick with goat musk and the earthy sweetness of fermented fruit. Somewhere nearby, a baby god coos and a nanny goat bleats in polite disapproval. Welcome to Dionysus's daycare. After his second birth and Hera's subsequent hissy fit, Zeus did what any responsible immortal father would do. He handed the child off and disappeared. Into the care of nymphs and wild creatures Dionysus went, cradled by nature and chaos alike. His first lullabies, birdsong and dripping water. His first toys, pine cones and leopard cubs. You sit cross-legged beside the young god who is currently trying to braid ivy into the beard of an extremely patient goat. The goat sighs, leans into it. You start to get the sense that this upbringing, while unconventional, is shaping something. There's no marble palace here, no golden crib, just cave walls and wind chime laughter, and yet he's thriving. He learns not from scrolls or oracles, but from the rhythm of animals, the growth patterns of vines, the way wind moves through olive trees. His education is tactile, sticky, feral. And slowly something takes root. An understanding that wildness isn't something to escape, it's something to become. One of the nymphs, possibly Macris, possibly just a cousin with similar cheekbones, tells you a story as you share roasted figs. He was never meant for Olympus, she says, picking seeds from her teeth. Too noisy, too soft, too loud, all at once. And you believe her. You watch Dionysus toddle barefoot into a thicket, returning moments later with a baby lynx curled around his shoulders like a scarf. He whispers to it in nonsense syllables. It blinks, purrs, and falls asleep on his head. It's during this time that the leopard starts appearing in the earliest artwork of Dionysus. Etched onto crude jugs, scratched into cave walls, pressed into clay tablets. Sometimes he rides one, sometimes he is one. The distinction is often fuzzy. Historians still argue whether this fusion reflects shamanic transformation practices or a metaphoric merging of divine chaos with animal instinct. You peel back the brush and step out of the cave. The sun is high, the hills baked golden. Dionysus is now a teenager somewhere between awkward and alarming. He's carved a throne out of driftwood and grapevines. He's holding court with a chorus of frogs. A lynx snaps nearby, twitching in its dreams. You wave, and he waves back with a grin so wide it could split stone. The nymphs keep him grounded, sort of. They remind him to eat. They tell stories around the fire about gods who flew too close to the sun or worse, married someone from Crete. He listens, sometimes. But when the moon rises and the air turns cool, something changes in him. He dances. Not the kind of dancing you learn in workshops or wedding halls, but something older, stranger. The leopards, now fully grown, circle the fire. Their paws match his feet. Their growls sync with the rhythm of his breath. You don't know where the god ends and the animal begins. You feel it in your chest. This wasn't a hiding place, it was a chrysalis. You turn to ask one of the nymphs how long he's been here. She shrugs. Time doesn't count in caves, she says. Only transformation. You wake one night, still in the cave, still curled beside a snoring panther, and everything is quiet. Dionysus is gone. His cradle, his cave, his throne of grapevine, all empty. But you know it's not abandonment. It's migration. The wild has raised him. Now it's time to raise the wild. You blink, and the cave is gone. You're now walking along a dusty trade road in Asia Minor, the heat curling off the stones like smoke from an unseen hearth. Dionysus is older, no longer a child raised by nymphs and goats, but a wandering youth with ivy in his hair and an amphora slung over one shoulder. And behind him, a parade of unlikely companions, flute players, maenads, satyrs, and big cats. A tiger yawns under a fig tree. A panther pads silently beside the wine cart, tail twitching to the beat of unseen drums. You swear you even see a cheetah in the distance, reclining like it owns the concept of sunbathing. No cages, no leashes, just vibes. This is the part the Greek poets always half-whispered about. The journey east, a god going off script. Dionysus doesn't return to Olympus, doesn't build temples. Instead, he wanders through Phrygia, Lydia, India, though India was probably more of an imaginative construct than a GPS destination. He walks where the olives give way to tamarind, where the dialects twist like vines, and where the animals are unlike anything the Greeks had ever sketched on their urns. You pause under a tree beside him, watching as he shares a bowl of fermented fig wine with a spotted cat whose head rests in his lap. It purrs not like a house cat, but like an engine. Loud, low, unmistakably feline. You sip your own bowl, trying not to choke. It tastes like honey mixed with regret, delicious. This is also the time when Dionysus starts making things. Not temples, rituals, not sermons, experiences. He invents a kind of ecstatic gathering where dance and wine meet rhythm and possession. You've probably heard the sanitized version, celebrations of the vine. But the real ones, they're full of shouting, stomping, sometimes even speaking in tongues. And at the edge of the gathering, always a pair of gleaming eyes. Watching, waiting. There's a story, maybe apocryphal, maybe not, of Dionysus taming a panther by letting it drink first from his cup. The animal lapped, blinked once, and fell asleep at his feet. From that day on, it never left him. Historians still argue whether that tale is symbolic of subduing base instincts or just really good ancient PR. You trudge behind the god as his procession crosses a bridge. He stops midway, points to a mural someone's painted on the side of a merchant's stall. It shows him with a crown of grapes, holding a thyrsus. That's the fennel staff topped with a pine cone, very in this season. He's flanked by two massive leopards. Mid-roar, he laughs. Too flattering, he says. I'm rarely that clean. The people he meets, farmers, traders, soldiers, are unsure what to make of him. He's divine but earthy, joyful but unsettling. He gives them wine and song, but also dreams they can't quite explain. And when he leaves, their fields grow faster. But their goats seem permanently weirded out. And always the animals. You learn that in many Eastern cultures, big cats are more than predators. They're spirit guardians, symbols of passage between life and death, instinct and wisdom. It's possible Dionysus didn't bring the leopards with him. It's possible the cultures he visited already revered them, and he simply joined their symphony. You pass a shrine carved into a cliff, dedicated not to Dionysus but to a local river god. Yet inside, tucked behind the offering bowl, is a tiny painted panther, reclining next to a cup. No inscription, just a wink. That night, under a canopy of unfamiliar stars, you watch the god sleep beside his cats. They curl around him like warmth with teeth. And you realize he doesn't travel with them to seem exotic. He travels with them because they understand him. Both are creatures of wild logic, soft-footed danger, and sacred unpredictability. And tomorrow? Tomorrow he'll wake up and invent theater, or hallucinate a new kind of fruit, or ride a leopard through a king's garden just to make a point. And you'll be right there, watching the big cats follow, tails high, purring softly like thunder that hasn't yet decided to strike. You're sweating, not because it's hot, though it is, but because you're gripping the edge of a chariot that's currently not being pulled by horses. Nope. These reins are attached to two fully grown leopards, muscles rippling, tails lashing, eyes glowing like twin oil lamps. And standing at the front of this absurd, glorious ride is Dionysus himself, arms outstretched, laughing like someone who's just turned their worst impulse into an art form. You, meanwhile, are wondering how friction and gravity are allowing any of this to happen. This is what the Greeks eventually called the Theasos, a godly procession/roadshow that Dionysus perfected over time. It's not just transportation, it's transformation on wheels. Behind you march the usual suspects. Maenads in wine-stained dresses, satyrs with panpipes and questionable grooming choices. Old men carrying baskets of grapes on their heads. There's music, dancing, spontaneous weeping, and the occasional goat trying to join in. It's equal parts spiritual parade and roaming existential crisis. But it's the leopard chariot that steals the show. You pass through towns and villages where people gape, not just at the spectacle, but at the sheer impossibility of it. Who rides wildcats? Who teaches them to pull a chariot? Dionysus does, or rather he invites them to. That's the key. He doesn't bend nature to his will. He tempts it into partnership. And what better animal for that delicate chaos dance than the leopard? Beautiful, lethal, always slightly annoyed. The chariot itself is no ordinary affair. Wreathed in ivy, trimmed with bronze, it smells of crushed myrtle and old wine. Dionysus throws back his head and sings something in a language you don't recognize, but the leopards seem to. Their pace shifts, smooth and silent, as if they're part of the music. You ask a nearby satyr how any of this works. He shrugs and offers you a fig soaked in honey and anise. They like him, he says, or they think he's one of them. And then he burps and pirouettes into a bush. Historians still argue whether the image of Dionysus in a leopard-drawn chariot originated from Persian influence, Indian iconography, or was simply invented by a very ambitious potter trying to sell more amphorae. But it stuck. By the time the mythos crystallized in the classical period, the feline chariot was canon. You roll through a dusty town square where a child points and screams "Tiger Wagon," and is immediately hushed by her grandmother, who mutters a prayer. It's easy to forget how unnerving Dionysus could be to the ordinary Greek. A god of joy? Fine. A god of wine? Lovely. A god of ecstasy, madness, and occasionally animal stampedes? Less charming. One priest you meet along the route tells you, half in awe and half in horror, that he rides the beasts because he is the threshold. You nod solemnly, unsure what that means, but too tired to ask for clarification. The chariot finally slows as you reach a hilt overlooking a vineyard-dotted valley. The leopards sit perfectly still, their flanks rising and falling in sync. Dionysus steps down, not like a conqueror, but like a man stepping off a boat, calm, intentional. The crowd that's followed you stops as well, falling into hush. And then he turns, places a hand on each feline head and bows to them. That's what breaks you. The moment you realize this isn't about power, it's about partnership, about shared wildness, about refusing to draw a line between God and animal, human and instinct. Dionysus isn't showing off. He's demonstrating something. The panthers blink slowly. One licks his hand. You blink too, and suddenly it all makes sense. The chariot, the cats, the chaos. He doesn't control the wild, he just speaks its language. And that's enough to make the leopards run. You wake up with straw in your hair and a tambourine on your chest. Not the worst morning you've had this week. Dionysus is already up, perched on a boulder with a leopard's tail draped over his lap like a lazy sash. He's not looking at you. He's watching his followers, 20 or 30 of them in various states of costume and coherence, as they prepare for another day of ecstatic mystery. You shuffle toward the group, trying not to step on any tails, hooves, or human limbs. Someone hands you a crown made of ivy. Someone else offers wine, though it's barely sunrise. This is not a place for moderation. This is where the taming happens, but not with cages or chains. It's rhythm, it's repetition. It's letting yourself unravel in a way that feels like you're becoming whole. The Maenads are dancing again, barefoot, loose-limbed, eyes wild. They're not just moving for fun. This is trance, ritual. If you listen closely, you can hear the percussion loop that underpins their steps. Clapping, drumming, the occasional shout. It's chaos with a beat, and it's all pulling in one direction. Release. And then the animals join in, not performing, not even obeying, just joining. A panther arches its back as a drumbeat hits. A lynx twitches its ears and paces around the dancers. A leopard rolls onto its side, paws twitching like it's keeping time. You think back to every temple story you've ever heard. Gods riding thunder, smiting mortals, or brooding from golden thrones. None of them ever danced with cats. There's something oddly democratic about all this. Dionysus doesn't sit above his followers. He's in the thick of it, sweating, spinning, half laughing, half crying. He moves like someone who knows grief intimately but refuses to stop dancing. You start to see it now. The leopards don't follow him because he's in charge. They follow him because he gets it. There's one Maenad, older than the others, with gray streaks in her hair and a scar that runs along her jaw. Who tells you that the animals come when the line between self and everything else gets thin enough? You think they're tamed, she says, but they're not. They're just listening. Historians still argue whether Dionysian rites actually included live animals, or if the presence of beasts in the stories was symbolic, representing inner urges, raw instinct, unfiltered being. But you're watching a literal cheetah nuzzle a flutist right now, so you'll let the academics debate it out. A satyr leaps over your legs, cackling. Someone starts howling, not like a wolf, but like a person pretending they used to be one. Dionysus claps in approval and pours wine over their head. The leopard beside him yawns, completely unbothered. And here's where it gets deeper than just weird partying. This isn't about chaos for its own sake. It's about confronting the stuff polite society tries to ignore. Death, pleasure, grief, ecstasy. The wildness we pretend we've grown past. Dionysus doesn't just say let go. He says become. Become the dance. Become the animal. Become the storm. He doesn't erase the boundaries between man and beast. He honors the moment they blur. You lock eyes with one of the leopards. Its pupils are wide, its breath slow. You feel seen and not entirely in a comfortable way. You wonder if this creature could speak. What would it say about your controlled little life? Probably, loosen up, mortal. By midday, the ritual has quieted. People lie in heaps, draped in fabric and fur, blinking at the clouds. Dionysus steps barefoot among them, whispering something to each. A blessing, a joke. You'll never know. The leopards follow him, of course, always just a step behind, always purring, always ready to dance. You're in Athens now. Or at least what Athens used to be before marble temples and democracy brochures. The air smells faintly of olives, ambition, and something smug. Philosophers lounge in shaded courtyards, debating logic, ethics, and the correct ratio of beard to wisdom. Everything is reasoned, structured, square, and then Dionysus arrives. Not on a chariot this time, not with trumpets, just appears. A breeze stirs, a flute wails from somewhere it shouldn't. You smell crushed grapes and wet earth, and then ivy, leopard fur. Laughter that feels like a wave hitting a very tidy sandcastle. You're standing beside a statue of Apollo, god of order, sunlight, and socially acceptable poetry, when Dionysus walks past, a leopard draped over his shoulders like a particularly smug scarf. He doesn't glance at the statue, he doesn't need to. The tension is baked into the stone already. Athens has a complicated relationship with Dionysus. They love the wine. They love the theater. They tolerate the madness just barely. This is a city of balance and measure. And Dionysus, he's the god of measure poured out on the floor. You sit in on a symposium where philosophers sip diluted wine and discuss virtue in measured tones. Dionysus is there too. Uninvited, obviously, lounging in the corner, scratching his panther behind the ear. He listens for a while, then interrupts the speaker mid-sentence. "Why does your truth need such tight shoes?" he asks. Silence. One man coughs into his toga. Another tries to smile politely. The leopard licks its paw. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was seen as a threat or a joke in classical Athens. Some plays paint him as ridiculous, a drunken buffoon. Others show him as terrifying, a god who laughs as cities fall and kings go mad. Maybe both. Maybe that's the point. Because here's the thing. Logic doesn't explain grief. Rules don't console desire. Reason doesn't help when your heart breaks and you want to scream until the sky listens. That's where Dionysus lives. In the gaps. In the collapse between what should make sense and what actually hurts. He doesn't argue with the logic bros. He outlives them. You follow him through back alleys and crowded forums, watching how people shift when he passes. Some avert their eyes, others follow, compelled. A few reach out, not to touch, but to understand, as if proximity might soften something hard inside them. And always, the big cats. They don't perform here. They loom. Silent reminders that this god carries with him something older than law. A memory of fur and fang and feeling. You overhear one scholar mutter, "He threatens the polis." Another replies, "He reminds us we're animals." You sit with that for a while, because it's true, isn't it? Beneath the robes and the syllogisms and the syllables, we're all still creatures. Still frightened, still yearning, still capable of wild joy. That night, you find yourself in the back row of a makeshift theater, watching a tragicomedy dedicated to Dionysus. It's chaotic, absurd. A man in a leopard mask shouts at the moon. A woman turns into a vine mid-monologue. The audience howls with laughter and grief. Not always in the right places. You look around. No one is pretending anymore. They're feeling, and you realize this was the plan all along. Dionysus didn't come to argue. He came to remind them they're still alive. You're backstage now. Not in a theater exactly, but something older, stranger. An open-air stone circle on the edge of a cliff, where the Aegean hisses below like it's trying to forget something. Torches flicker. Shadows ripple across painted masks hanging from ropes. And just beyond the stone arch, a crowd buzzes. Not polite anticipation, but the nervous energy of people who know they're about to feel something real. You duck behind a curtain of ivy and find Dionysus pacing barefoot. He's not wearing a crown tonight, just a tunic stained with wine and a necklace of what looks like leopard teeth. One of the actual leopards is lying just off stage, its tail flicking like it's waiting for its cue. And maybe it is, because tonight is a Dionysian festival, and this isn't just theater, this is ritual. The Greeks didn't invent drama for fun, they did it because it mattered, because telling stories out loud in front of other people could change you, could open something in you. And it was Dionysus, god of masks, emotion, transformation, who owned that power. You peek into the costume pile. Robes soaked in sweat, masks shaped like grinning gods and crying women. Animal skins that probably used to breathe. Everything smells like fear and citrus and beeswax. A man sits in the corner murmuring his lines to a goat. No one seems to find this odd, and at the center of it all, the presence. Not Dionysus the person, Dionysus the feeling. Like a hum under your ribs, like a wind you can't see but suddenly believe in. The leopards sense it too. One rises and pads to the edge of the performance space, curling its tail around a statue's ankle. The actors begin. A tragedy, a tale of betrayal and regret. The chorus wails, then whispers. The crowd leans forward. You find yourself mouthing the lines even though you've never heard this play before. It's like the words are remembering you. And then, without warning, a man in the front row begins to sob. Loud, unashamed, shoulders shaking. No one stops him. A woman beside him puts her hand on his. The actors keep going. The leopard blinks. This is what Dionysus does. He doesn't just entertain, he cracks you open. Historians still argue whether the presence of big cats in Dionysian ritual was literal. Did they really bring leopards to the orchestra pit? Or symbolic, a representation of instinct and edge? But here now, watching the shadows move and the air thicken with emotion, it doesn't feel like a metaphor. The feline power is real, not just in claws and teeth, but in watchfulness, in stillness, in the terrifying act of witnessing. The play ends with silence, no applause, just a shared exhale. The crowd disperses slowly like smoke. Dionysus nods once, not to the actors, but to the leopard. You remain seated, and as the torches burn lower, the god approaches. He doesn't speak, just presses a mask into your hands. You turn it over. It's shaped like your own face, but wilder. Mouth open, eyes glinting, hair crowned with ivy. Behind you, the leopard purrs. You don't know if you're being invited to act or to be, but either way, it's time to step through the curtain. You're somewhere indoors now, but only barely. The walls are marble, sure, but the ivy has crept in through the window slats. The rugs smell faintly of wine. There's a statue of Aphrodite in the corner, but even she seems to be side-eyeing the leopard lounging near the bath basin. This isn't a temple, this is a bedroom. And tonight Dionysus is reclining in it, half draped in silk and wholly unconcerned about your presence. This part of the story is quieter, but no less strange. Because it turns out, Dionysus's influence didn't end with ecstatic rituals or theatrical transformations. He slipped into the private spaces too, into the way people decorated their homes, into the fantasies they whispered by oil lamp light, into mosaics, perfumes, and pillows, and crucially still surrounded by big cats. You examine the wall fresco above the bed. Dionysus reclines on a couch, one leg extended, wine cup balanced on his knee. Behind him, a leopard staring directly at the viewer, not snarling, not leaping, just waiting. It's unsettling and oddly alluring. The Greeks weren't shy about sensuality, and Dionysus was one of its favored avatars. Not in the domineering, chest-thumping way of Ares, or the coy, curated sparkle of Aphrodite. Dionysus's sensuality was messy, unraveled, sweat-slicked and sincere. And the leopards? They weren't just decorations. They represented that edge, beauty with danger, softness with threat. You wander into the mosaic-lined atrium. Another image, Dionysus pouring wine into the mouth of a leopard. They're so close their noses touch. It's strangely intimate, the kind of closeness that says, we've seen each other at our worst and stayed. Historians still debate whether the cats here symbolized luxury, exoticism, or something deeper. Imported from the East, they were rare, dangerous, and impossible to fully tame, which made them perfect for Roman collectors and for Dionysus, who wasn't interested in taming anything, least of all himself. You glance at a silver mirror on the vanity and notice a small panther figurine etched into the handle. Even in grooming, even in the private rituals of scent and self-adornment, the image endures. Leopard-spotted perfume bottles, panther-shaped jewelry clasps, even wine goblets painted with half-human, half-feline revelers. This wasn't just fashion, it was mood, a statement that said, I belong to the night that dances, I drink deeply, I might bite. You turn down the hall and find a bedchamber clearly untouched for years. Dust gathers in drifts, but on the ceiling, a painting of Dionysus and a woman twined together beneath a canopy of vines. Watching them, from each corner of the ceiling are 4 leopards, silent, protective, or maybe just amused. You lie back on the floor and let the image hang above you. There's something about the presence of those cats that feels important, not just as symbols of sex or luxury, but as reminders that even in our most intimate, vulnerable moments, we are not entirely civilized. There's always something instinctual, something wild. Dionysus knew that. He didn't ask people to reject their instincts, he asked them to dance with them, to make peace with the animal inside. And the leopards, watchful, velvet-footed, amused, were always nearby, ready to remind you. You close your eyes, the stone cool beneath your back. Somewhere in the house you hear the faint rattle of a tambourine, a soft purr, a whisper of silk, and just for a moment you wonder if the god is still here, maybe not in body, but definitely in mood, definitely in the cat curled beside you now, breathing slow and steady, its fur warm against your skin. The streets are louder now. You're in Rome and everything here feels like a copy turned up too loud. Columns taller, coins shinier, egos much, much bigger. The gods of old Greece didn't retire, of course. They were imported, translated, made slightly more marketable. And Dionysus? He's been rebranded as Bacchus, patron of parties, patron of wine, and apparently patron of over-the-top everything. You follow a crowd through a grand avenue where rose petals rain from balconies and musicians toot double pipes like their lives depend on it. At the center of this floral tornado comes a chariot, and yes, once again it's feline-powered. But these aren't just leopards, they're imported leopards, sleek, exotic, possibly confused. You overhear a senator bragging that the beasts were shipped all the way from India, costing more than a temple roof. Because what's more Roman than taking a subtle religious symbol and turning it into an extremely literal parade float? Bacchus, Dionysus with better PR and fewer rules, is still flanked by big cats. But in Rome, the emphasis has shifted. The cats aren't companions anymore. They're props, status symbols, proof of wealth and control. You pass a dinner party where a half-sedated panther has been tied to a pillar for ambiance. It blinks once, slowly, like it's reconsidering its life choices. Historians still argue whether Romans ever truly understood Dionysus, or whether they just liked the wine and ignored the metaphysics. Bacchic cults sprang up across the empire, some joyful, some terrifying. At their peak, Roman senators passed laws to limit the gatherings, citing moral panic, drunken rebellion, and questionable proximity to wild animals. You peek into a villa where a Bacchic fresco covers an entire wall. It's beautiful. Figures twisting in ecstasy, garlands flying, limbs tangled. But there's something missing. The leopards look too still, too polite. They've been declawed, stylized, tamed. You slip into a shadowed garden where a statue of Bacchus holds a cluster of grapes toward a reclining panther. There's no mischief in his face, no teeth in the beasts, just decoration, just a safe reminder of wildness tucked behind hedges and cleaned twice a week. And yet, if you listen closely, there's still a whisper in the fountain spray, in the rustle of ivy across the wall, in the twitch of the cat's stone tail, because Dionysus never fully dies, he just goes underground. Literally, in fact. Mystery cults, especially in southern Italy and Sicily, take up his torch, sometimes literally, and descend into caves to hold rites that feel closer to the older truth. There, far from marble and senators, the big cats return, not as pets, as omens. You kneel beside a mosaic near a rural temple ruin, mostly ivy now, and see an image of Bacchus riding not in a chariot, but on the back of a single leopard, arms out, mouth open in laughter or a scream. The leopard's face is more human than animal. The gods more animal than divine. Rome may have tried to declaw him, but Dionysus always finds his way back to fang and fur. You stand, brushing leaves from your tunic. Somewhere nearby, a distant drumbeat starts. Faint, wild. You think maybe, just maybe, the panthers are waking up. You're in the dark now. Not metaphorically, but fully, literally underground. The air is cooler here, scented with damp stone, burnt resin, and something faintly floral. You move carefully, torch in hand, past carved pillars and low ceilings smeared with smoke. Ahead, a circle of people murmurs in soft unison. You've stumbled into a Dionysian mystery rite. And if the cats don't get you, the symbolism might. This is where the public face of Dionysus, the parties, the theater, the chariots melts away. Here, beneath the world, the deeper layers unfold. You notice them in the masks hung along the chamber walls. Faces not of joy, but of terror, rapture and ruin. You spot a painted fresco of a woman dissolving into ivy, a man weeping wine instead of tears, and in the center of it all, a leopard. Not a statue, not a mosaic. A living, breathing lynx sitting perfectly still beside the altar. Its eyes reflect the torchlight like two coins dipped in moonlight. It doesn't flinch, doesn't blink, just stares at you. Your instinct is to bow, you don't even question why. The rite begins, not with trumpets, but with footsteps, slow, repeating. A rhythm builds, a heartbeat from a world before clocks. The initiates sway in time, their faces painted, their identities erased. One holds a staff topped with a pine cone, another cradles a bowl of wine like it's a newborn. No one speaks Dionysus's name aloud. Instead, they chant titles. Lucios, the Loosener. Eleutherios, the Liberator. Dendrites, the one of the trees, each name like a key, each key opening a different locked part of you. The lynx hasn't moved. Someone places a crown of vine leaves on your head. Someone else presses a pomegranate into your palm. The juice runs between your fingers. You're not sure when you started crying, or why. Historians still argue what happened in these rites, because those who went through them didn't write memoirs. They left behind symbols, snakes, grapes, big cats, and silence. Some say it was about death and rebirth. Others think it was about emotional catharsis. A few suggest hallucinogens were involved. You personally suspect the wine-to-water ratio was extremely questionable. But what's clear is that people came here not to escape the world, but to face it, without masks, or maybe with masks, but ones that told deeper truths than their own faces ever could. You glance again at the lynx, it's still watching you. And for one terrible and beautiful moment, you see yourself in its gaze. Not the outer you, not the polite you, but the you with sharp edges, with wild grief, with raw, unedited joy. You feel the animal inside you stretch, wake, and blink. And then, just like that, it ends. The initiates break their circle. No one claps, no one speaks. They walk past you, barefoot and solemn, vines trailing behind them like soft green ghosts. You follow, unsure what just happened, only that something did. The lynx finally moves, once. It stands, pads over to the spot you had just occupied, and sits. You leave the chamber with wet cheeks and dirty feet. You don't know if you're different now. But the stars look sharper when you emerge, and the night sounds louder. You're standing on temple steps now, crumbling, ancient, once grand, now overtaken by roots and silence. Somewhere far behind you, the chants of mystery rites still echo in your bones. But here, the wind blows colder, less forgiving. You've arrived at the part of the story where not everyone loved Dionysus. Because for all his parties and poetry, Dionysus was feared. And not just by those who preferred their gods with rules and paperwork. by authorities, by temples, by people who saw what he did to cities, to logic, to carefully folded hierarchies. Dionysus didn't ask permission. He danced across boundaries like they were chalk lines on a child's game. And the cats? They didn't help his case. You step into the remains of a shrine, ivy choked, the altar toppled, and notice the claw marks on the outer columns. Literal, symbolic, or just bored leopards scratching. You're not sure, but they're there. 5 deep grooves, as if something wild refused to be contained. There are stories, so many stories of what happened when people tried to resist Dionysus. Pentheus of Thebes comes to mind, a king who scoffed at ecstasy and chaos, who mocked the Maenads, the rites, the idea of a god who preferred singing to stabbing. So what did Dionysus do? He didn't strike him down. No lightning, no plague. He simply invited Pentheus to see for himself, disguised him as a woman, led him into the woods. Pentheus never returned. Historians still debate whether that myth is warning or metaphor, whether Pentheus's fate was punishment or transformation gone wrong. But you know this. The wild, when ignored or repressed, doesn't disappear. It waits, gathers, returns with claws. And the cats, oh, they're part of that return. You pass another ruined temple, this one dedicated to Apollo, and carved into one of its side panels, faint but deliberate, is a leopard. Just one. No label, no explanation, almost like it wandered onto the marble and refused to leave. Roman generals wrote nervously about Bacchic cults, about how they undermined order, inflamed the youth, encouraged women to shout. One senator declared, "We must fear the god who gives them wild eyes." Others simply feared the animals. Because big cats aren't just dangerous, they're proof. Proof that the wild doesn't need your permission, that joy doesn't ask for laws, that grief doesn't follow schedules. And Dionysus, draped in leopard skin, surrounded by purring threat, embodied all of it. You overhear a priest muttering that temples found paw prints in their courtyards, that altars were overrun with vines overnight, that statues of more respectable gods were found toppled, not by humans but by storms that smelled of myrrh and madness. One myth even claims that Hera sent lions to devour Dionysus once, and they didn't. They lay down at his feet instead. One yawned, the other offered him its paw. You walk into a crumbled sanctuary where a painting remains on the back wall. Faded but unmistakable. Dionysus wreathed in grape leaves, surrounded not just by worshippers but by animals. Cats, yes, but also foxes, birds, snakes, wolves, creatures that don't usually mingle, but here they do. Because where he walks, the boundaries fall, and those who fear him, they're not afraid of the wine. They're afraid of what comes after. When the feast ends and the masks fall and the leopards don't leave. When the joy fades and you're left with your real self, barefoot, trembling, free. You sit down on the cold stone floor. Above you, stars blink through a shattered roof. Something soft brushes against your leg. You don't look, you don't need to, you've already been seen. The sun is setting now, gold slipping into violet, and you find yourself walking through a city that no longer remembers the name Dionysus. Or if it does, it pronounces it wrong. sells it on coasters and forgets the clause. But if you squint, really squint, you'll see traces of him everywhere. You're at a festival, not ancient, not even very sacred. There's loud music, plastic cups, a stage lit in purple and green, and in the crowd, people dancing like they've forgotten their names. Someone's crying. Someone else is laughing in a way that almost sounds feral. No one's checking their watches. This is still him. The rituals may be gone, the chariots dismantled, but the spirit remains. In carnivals, raves, parades, anywhere joy bursts through the seams of civility, where humans admit, if only for a moment, that they are still creatures, still hungry for surrender, still aching for ecstasy. You see a girl in a leopard print coat spin in circles, laughing until she falls over. A little boy runs past wearing a plastic crown of ivy. An older man closes his eyes as music rolls through his body like thunder. None of them know they're invoking a god, and yet there's that low hum again. The one in your chest. You step into an alley behind the stage hoping for quiet. Instead, you find a mural, spray-painted, unfinished. But you know who it is: Dionysus, hair loose, eyes half shut, and beside him a panther drawn in swirls and dripping paint. It's not accurate, not anatomically correct, but it's right. The feeling is right. You reach out and touch the painted paw print, still wet. Historians argue whether Dionysus's influence truly survived Christianity's sweep, or if he dissolved into metaphors and minor festivals. But truthfully, you've seen him. In every chaotic wedding reception, in every tearful toast, in every blackout that ends with someone hugging a tree. He never left. You walk on, past a tattoo parlor where someone's getting a leopard etched into their shoulder. Past a bookstore where a play by Euripides gathers dust. Past a bar called Panther and Pinecone. You don't enter, you just smile. Even the iconography persists. The thyrsus appears now in stylized logos. The leopard skin reemerges each fall as fashion. The grapevine as metaphor, emoji, and Instagram caption. It's not subtle, but neither was Dionysus. You duck into a small neighborhood party. There's food, laughter, a group dancing to a rhythm someone's making by slapping a wine bottle. One woman notices you and says, "We do this every year, don't know why, just feels good, feels right." And that's the thing. Ritual never truly dies. It just shapeshifts. The leopards may not be literal anymore, but they're still watching. In art, in dreams, in the spaces where people allow themselves to lose control just for a while. You turn a corner and find a street performer in a leopard print robe balancing a cup on her head while reciting fragments of poetry. You toss her a coin. She winks. The leopard is still pulling the chariot. It just wears new stripes. You're tired now. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that settles in your shoulders after a long, strange pilgrimage. You've wandered through myths and mosaics, temples and taverns, memories and metaphors. And at every turn, soft footfalls, the flick of a tail, the warm, impossible breath of a leopard who does not need to explain itself. And finally, you find yourself in a grove. Not quite wild, not quite cultivated. Fig trees bow under the weight of overripe fruit. A narrow stream winds through the grass, glinting in the fading light. Someone's hung bells from the branches, not for worship, just because the wind sounds nicer with them. Dionysus is here. Older, perhaps. Calmer, but not diminished. He's reclining beneath the largest fig tree, one arm resting on a leopard's back, the other cradling a bowl of wine. He gestures for you to sit. You do, and nothing happens. There's no ritual, no transformation, no riddle or revelation, just quiet. It's only after a few minutes that you realize you've been waiting for the point, the lesson, the reason. But Dionysus doesn't give those. He never has. He offers experiences, not definitions. He doesn't explain why the leopard follows. He just lives in a way that makes it obvious they should. You glance at the cat. It meets your gaze, then yawns, revealing teeth that gleam like ancient knives. And suddenly it all makes sense, not in words, but in feeling. The leopards were never symbols. They were never accessories. They were answers. Answers to the questions no one dares to ask out loud. What if beauty doesn't need to be safe? What if joy should have claws? What if the wildest parts of us aren't flaws, but invitations? Historians still debate it all, of course. They argue over the murals, the rituals, the wine ratios, the leopard breeds. They write papers about duality, ecstasy, and behavioral symbolism, and they miss it entirely. Because the real truth is this: Dionysus didn't need the beasts. He was the beast, and he loved what recognized him. The leopard nuzzles his hand. He smiles, not a grin, not a smirk, just something quiet, full, finished. You lie back, staring up through the fig branches. A single leaf drifts down onto your chest. The stars begin to come out, not one by one, but in clusters like startled birds. The night hums. The air is warm. You don't speak. You don't have to. Because now you understand. The god didn't ride leopards for spectacle. He walked beside them because they never asked him to explain himself. And neither will you. You're still lying beneath the fig tree. The stars are brighter now, spread across the sky like crushed quartz, flickering softly above the breath of sleeping vines. The grove is quiet, save for the gentle shuffle of leaves and the rhythmic rise and fall of the leopard's breath beside you. Even the insects hum like a lullaby. You shift slightly and the grass sighs beneath you. Your muscles melt into the earth. There's no more urgency, no more questions, just stillness. The god doesn't speak again. He doesn't need to. You carry him with you now, in the part of you that knows how to dance without music, in the part that forgives the mess, that welcomes the joy without needing to label it. The wildness in you stretches, yawns, and curls back up to sleep. Far away you hear bells, faint, irregular, drifting on the wind. Somewhere else, maybe in another lifetime, the feast still continues, but here time is syrup slow, gentle, unconcerned. You close your eyes. The night wraps around you like velvet, cool, soft, endless. The leopard shifts closer, presses its side against yours. Warm, solid, real, and you let go of reason, of rhythm, of every name you've worn like armor. You let go because this is the part of the story where the lines between God and human, dream and history, fear and desire, all blur into quiet, into peace. And if you listen, truly listen, you'll still hear the purr of a cat in the dark.